Hi, thank you very much. I have to say I'm not too happy about following Justin. That was pretty impressive. I'm feeling a little bit nervous right now. I unfortunately won't be speaking without notes. I will be referring to them because if I was left to kind of wander on, I'd go off into tangents and I'd start telling you about the latest series of Star Trek, and I don't think anybody wants that. So now for something a little bit more civil service. So hello, my name is Catherine Bannon. I'm a diplomat in the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade, and I'm currently working as Deputy Director of the Passport Service with responsibility for the public office in Mount Street, which you might be familiar with, and also for our customer service. I'm aware that many of you come from the private sector, and you might be asking, why is someone from the civil service standing up here talking to us about customer service? And you would be forgiven for that because we are quite different. I come from a government department. We're not trying to sell anything. I'm certainly not trying to sell passports, which is a pity because we have a monopoly, so it would have been kind of handy. But it's not as if somebody can say, you know what, I don't like harps. I don't fancy them. I like a Tanzanian passport. They have lions. Lions are cool. People can't do that, or at least most people can't do that. We are the sole service provider for passports for Irish people. And that changes the way in which we interact with people. So before I talk about passports, I'd like to talk a little bit about the whole concept of customer service within the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade. And to do that, I'd like to bring you back to when I was a young diplomat, a long time ago, back on foreign posting. And we were a small two-diplomat mission, myself and the ambassador. And I was a jack of all trades, as a lot of junior diplomats are. I hope I'm not scaring my colleague here, Gavin. He'll be going on foreign posting shortly, so I'm trying to make it sound more glamorous than it is. And so my job involved writing political reports, doing the accounts for the mission, managing the local staff, organizing cultural events. For example, one day I spent the morning crawling around the server room floor trying to get those things called the network points. As you can see, I'm very technological, into the ports. And then at some point I had to kind of stand up, dust myself off, get into the embassy car with the driver and the flag and ceremoniously be driven to the president's house, where I was part of the delegation welcoming Angela Merkel to town. And later, when I saw a photograph of myself and Mrs. Merkel, just chatting, I noticed that there was a kind of a streak of computer floor dust on my suit. And that is the glamour of diplomatic life. And there are far fewer Ferrero Rocher than I was led to believe. Anyway, one of these days that I was in the mission, a young, very distraught Irish woman turned up in the embassy reception. And she had been visiting her sick mother back in Ireland. And she was transiting back to Australia, where she lived with her partner and her young baby. And when transiting, she was booted out of the airport because there was a problem with her visa, and she had to go to the Australian embassy and get her visa sorted out. But the problem was she had an onward ticket, she had enough money for her visa, but she did not have access to funds to pay for a hotel for the night. And that's when she came to us. She was in a totally alien place with no family, no friends, no money, no options. And that's when a lot of people come to us. And I'd been in her situation. I'd been traveling and got myself into difficult situations. And her situation resonated with me. So I did what really seemed to me to be the only option at the time. I took her home to my apartment. I cooked her dinner. I gave her a glass of wine. I listened to her story. I gave her clean clothes. I gave her my only copy of my favorite book. And I gave her a spare room for the night. And the next day she left, and I never heard from her again. And now when I look back on it, I think that seems a bit unusual. Why would I have invited a total stranger into my home? I'm not sure it was the wisest move I ever made, really. But to me, it seemed pretty normal at the time. And it's because in the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade, the service to the citizen is at the very core of everything we do. Because to us, they're not just customers. They are us. They are citizens. I'm not sure if it's the same. For example, I don't know if there's anyone here from Tesco. I spend a lot of time talking to customer service in Tesco. They're very good. But I imagine if you're from Tesco, I mean, you could be a customer in SuperValu. But we are our own customers. For example, I was getting, before online renewals for children came in, I was getting my kid's passport last year, and I filled out the form wrong, ended up having a big fight with the guard in the Garda station who was refusing to sign my form. Actually, to my mortification, I had to whip out my business card and shout, "I know what I'm talking about." Didn't really believe me, and in fairness, he wouldn't have been wrong there. But the citizen to us, because we relate to them, because they are who we are, they are at the center of everything that I think the public service and the civil service is about. And certainly for people in foreign posting, and I know my colleagues have had the same experiences, we have held the hands of bereaved families and walked through them on the very weeks and days of their lives. We have visited citizens in hospitals, in psychiatric facilities, in prisons, and sometimes we're the only visitors that they have for weeks on end. We have dealt with bombings, with kidnappings, with natural disasters. We see people at their most vulnerable, and quite often, we are all that they have. So that is the culture of customer service that I come from. And when I was assigned to the passport service, I saw that same culture permeating there. And you would see staff members almost lovingly carrying families' passport applications through the system, making sure that that family got to do their trip on time. Because our staff wanted to help citizens who needed our help. And there could have been 300 people trying to get through on the phones, and there often were. But we were all about the one person that we spoke to, the one person that was standing in front of us. And we would pursue their case with a kind of laser focus, because it's who we are. It's in our DNA to help the citizens who need us. So, sorry, I have a few not very fancy graphics, but I don't actually know how to, is my technological inability coming in there. So just to show you here, this is the demand of passports from 2015, I think, up until 2023, and obviously some of it's actual demand and some of it's forecasted demand. But what you can see is that 2015, we were processing under 700,000 passports a year. And at 2019, that's us, right at the peak. We don't know where we're going to be at the end of this year, but we're thinking it could be up around 900,000 passports, if not more, this year. And that's a massive increase. And we haven't had any increase in resources. So what we needed were serious efficiencies and fast. So over the past 4 years, before I go on, I just want to, if you're not familiar with the passport service, I just wanted to kind of briefly outline who we are. So kind of around our service, we have our 80 foreign missions as part of the Department of Foreign Affairs Diplomatic Service. And so those are embassies and consulates that you may have come across when you're traveling abroad. But in terms of the passport service itself, we have about 150 staff in Mount Street in Dublin. We have 245 staff in Balbriggan, where quite a lot of the processing is done. And we also have a public office and about 125 staff down in Cork. So for the past 4 years or so, we have been changing the way in which we do things. We have been digitizing our service and trying to bring our customers along with us. And the first thing we did back in 2013 was a very basic thing. We put in an online appointment service. So it was the end to the famous art of queuing outside the passport service. I don't think very many people miss that. So it allowed our customers to make an appointment online and to know that they could come into the office and that they wouldn't be hanging around all day, which in terms of kind of the passport service was a big change. And there are still people who still turn up and want to queue and try to queue, because I think with passports in particular, you're only getting a passport every 10 years. So your experience and your knowledge of how the system works is often based on what happened when you experienced it 10 years ago. And then in 2015, we bought in the passport card. I don't know if any of you have them, they're pretty handy. So they're a small credit card sized passport. They are a full passport that can be used for travel within the EU. And obviously they're much easier to carry around. You can fit them in your wallet, in your back pocket. And one of the unintended side effects, actually, of it was that fewer people were losing their passports, because young men in particular were going out for the night and they were using it as ID and they were putting it in their pocket and they were having a few drinks and the passport was gone. So this gives them an alternative, because passports are not designed for, a drunk man's back pocket. So then came the big change. So I flicked through that one pretty fast. And so in 2017, we brought in online renewals for adults. And this is when things really started to change from the customer, and we generated very, very serious efficiencies, not just for the customer, but also for ourselves. And just to show you here, this is, if you were doing an old kind of Passport Express application, with the post office and the green forms and the guards and all that, this is the process that you would have to go through. And the top part is the customer's journey. And the bottom part is the journey that it went through once it got to our offices. And then when we introduced online renewals for adults, that was the journey. And so no longer did people have to go to a post office and get a form, and then go to the guards and get it witnessed, and perhaps go to someone else to get consent for their children's passports witnessed. They didn't even need to go to a photo booth to get the photos anymore. You can do it all in a few minutes from the comfort of your home without ever leaving it. And from our side, we can process online adult renewals 4 times faster than we can a traditional Passport Express paper application. And so that really is where we were talking about changing, revolutionizing the experience, not just for the customer, but also for us. And I don't know if any of you are aware as well, just in 2018, in December, just a few months ago actually, we brought in online renewals for children. So the whole family can renew online now. And all of these enormous changes have transformed the way in which we engage with our customer. And we're moving from a paper-based process with a huge level of intervention for the customer to one where you can apply for a passport without having to engage with another human being. But what we learned along this journey is that people like human beings. So while our systems were faster and better and more efficient than ever before, people had questions, and they had needs, and they had problems. And no amount of information that we put up on our website was going to address those needs. They wanted a human connection. They wanted someone to tell them that even though the website said their passport would take 10 days, that their passport would actually take 10 days. They wanted to hear that from a human. Sometimes they haven't left enough time and they want to know, can they get their passport speeded up? Sometimes a family member has died suddenly abroad and they want to know what their options are. Sometimes they just can't find their passport and they're in a panic and they just want to talk to somebody. And there are hundreds of reasons why people might want to talk to us, and thousands of people trying to talk to us, but we weren't able to get to them all. And as a result, people were coming at us from all sides, on our phones, on Twitter, on email, on web chat. And when they couldn't get through to us, they would ring their TD. They would ring every phone extension in the Department of Foreign Affairs. And they would turn up in our public office in a total panic. And it wasn't enough. We weren't doing enough. And we realized that all the digitization and all the efficiencies that we had gained did not remove the need that the citizen has for human interaction. But we weren't able to give them what we needed. At that time, we're only really talking about 2.5 months ago here, we only had 5 to 10 people at most on the phones or on web chat handling customer queries. And it just wasn't enough. And so in December, we decided to create a customer service hub, which would streamline the customer service activities of the entire passport service into one place. We committed to having 100 people working in the hub by May 2019. It's only a couple of months now. So that's a big change from the 10 or so that we had back in December. We already have 65 out of the 100 in place, with the rest to come in the next few weeks. So we've been onboarding very, very fast. We limited our channels to phones and web chat. So we took away the email, we took away the feedback forms. We said we can't spread ourselves too thin. These are the 2 channels that you can contact us on. And most crucially, we set up something the name of which we haven't quite agreed, but we're fighting about that at the moment. But I'm going to go with Hub Response Unit on the basis that this is being filmed, so now it's going to be called the Hub Response Unit. Thank you. And what this means, these people they're based within our customer service hub. They don't actually speak to customers. But what they do is they take any action that is required to resolve a customer's query. So in certain situations, if someone rings up on the phone and says, for example, I put my application in 8 days ago, but I'm traveling in 4 or 5 days. I'm just worried it's not going to happen. The operator on the phone or the web chat can hand it over to one of their colleagues, maybe sitting in the same room, and say, can you look at this now? And they can look at it and they can approve it and they can send it on its journey to kind of printing and dispatch, and it will be out within a day or 2, hopefully. Or if somebody rings up and says, I want to change the address, or I have a problem with the consent, I need to redo it, we can, in some cases, resolve that issue. And what it means is that it's reducing the frustration for our operators on the phones and web chat who weren't able to give an answer, who weren't able to say that they knew what was going to happen with this. And it means that they can resolve issues as they arise, they can decrease staff frustration, and they can reduce the number of repeat calls. And the impact that this is having, that our focus on having a dedicated customer service hub is clear. If you look at, it's not very clear, I don't know if you can see it. So the far graph there is our total calls handled weekly. So in December, we were handling about 1,200 calls a week. That was all we were able to take on. And now we're handling 5,000 a week. So that's, a 4 or 5-fold increase in, kind of 2 to 3 weeks once we started taking on new staff. And the same with our web chat. We were handling kind of maybe 700 a week, and we're now handling 2,500 a week. And we're only at 65% capacity, and we have the next kind of group of people starting to come in on the 25th of March. So we expect that to increase quite significantly again, and also because they're very new, it takes people an awful lot longer. So we find that kind of 6 months into kind of someone operating on the phones or web chat, that's when they hit peak capacity, but that their output is quite significantly reduced before that. And so we don't just want to give our customers a better and a faster and cooler way of getting passports. We also kind of want to go back to what we in the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade have always wanted to do. And we want to listen to people, and we want to help them, and we want to let them know that we're still here for them. And we also want to be very, very careful that when we're busy making progress and making advances in digitizing, that we don't leave people behind. We want to make sure that we're still catering for the people who might need a little bit of extra assistance from us. So those who are elderly, those with disabilities, those for whom English isn't a first language. We don't just want to make it better for 90% of people. We want to make our service better for 100% of people. And finally, I think in order to close the circle, I want to go back and tell you another story about my glamorous days as a young diplomat on foreign posting. And this one isn't actually as positive, I suppose, one, but I did learn an awful lot from it. I was on posting, I was the duty officer quite a lot of the time. So that meant that I had an emergency phone. And I would have this phone, and I would have to answer it day or night, 7 days a week, basically for 3 years, out of office hours. And I had it on a permanent basis, and I could ring at absolutely any time. And it was supposed to be for emergencies, but there are people who think that an emergency is whether or not they have to pack insect repellent for a trip to Japan at 2 o'clock in the morning. So some people have a different idea of emergencies than others. And one morning, I took a call at 5 a.m. From a very important businessman. That's what he told me anyway. And he wanted me to give him the phone number of a businessman in our local community. And it was 5 o'clock in the morning, and I said no. And then he said, I want you to ring him. I said, I can't give you the person's phone number directly. And he said, I want you to ring him and wake him up and get him to ring me. And he told me what the phone call was about. And I said, I will ring him and tell him at a reasonable hour. And this man was not happy. He was not happy with me. He got very aggressive. He was threatening to ring the minister at one point, which I thought was a bit of an overreach. But he said he was going to complain about me. And he did. He complained officially about me. And he said that I was rude and that I was unhelpful. And he might have had a point. It was 5 a.m. He did not have an emergency. And I cannot say honestly that I was at my most sparkly. But at the same time, he had inappropriately used an emergency service. And my ambassador, when he found out about the complaint, he kind of came into me and he said, well, I know, Catherine, he's being very difficult and it's all really a little bit annoying and I'm sure everything you did was totally fine, but really maybe you should just apologize to him, make him go away. And so I did. I rang this man back, who had been terribly unpleasant, and I, through gritted teeth, said, I am sorry. I am sorry for the level of customer service that I gave you. And I never forgot that. And I never forgot the feeling that nobody had my back. So now that it's my staff on the front line, taking abuse from certain people, getting complaints, sometimes without justification, sometimes with justification, but most of the time without justification, I want them to feel that we have their back. And the vast majority of our interactions with the customer are totally polite and positive and respectful. And if people get aggressive, if they curse at my staff, if they say that they want to speak to someone who has an Irish accent, we have zero tolerance for that. The staff on the front line, on the phones, in the public office, on web chat, they deal with people who are under significant stress, who are worried and who are stressed and anxious and frustrated and sometimes angry. They carry out their duties with professionalism and with grace under pressure. And in return, we need to look at what we can give our staff. Dignity in the workplace, flexibility in how they manage their work, a strong career path with real and varied opportunities, a program of job rotation, coaching, mentoring. And I think that these are some of our next challenges. We are definitely not there yet. I'm very proud of the work that we do in the Passport Service and in the wider Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade. I'm proud of our staff, whether it's a phone operator in Mount Street dealing with a passport query, or a member of local staff in many of our missions abroad dealing with illness or death. I have seen time and time again that what drives them is the desire to help the citizen who needs us. And to do our job as managers is to give our staff the tools, the resources, and the support to do just that. So I've enjoyed being here today. That wasn't nearly as bad as I thought it was going to be. So thank you very much.